Ladies and gentlemen, the problem of Iran is growing bigger by the moment. They are making every effort to destroy God's chosen people. One thing is certain, the Bible makes it clear who wins, and it even outlines exactly what's going to happen. Israel will prevail. The Bible's predictions are manifesting at this very moment, and I can promise you the conversation you're about to hear is powerful. Hold on to the seat of your pants. This is going to be fun. Let me bring this map up. I'm going to cut you loose on this because this is an important conversation to be having. Explain to people what they're seeing here and maybe an eye that might not be familiar with the region.
Okay, so the blue stuff on the left-hand side is the Mediterranean Sea. So we're actually looking at the eastern edge of the Mediterranean Sea, what's called the Near East. The red line that you see running through the middle of the map is the border between us on the southern part of the red line, at the bottom of the red line. And the little lake that you see there is the Sea of Galilee. And on the top of the red line, above the red line, are two countries actually. On the left side is Lebanon, and on the right side is Syria. So you're looking at the northern border of Israel. It actually cuts through from west to east, through the mountains of the Upper Galilee. Then you see it kind of takes a turn and it creates a little finger kind of sticking up into the connection of the border between Syria and Lebanon. We call that the Galilean finger, and that's the green area, which is a valley. So what I'm trying to do is kind of illustrate what the border between Israel on the south of this and Syria and Lebanon on the north of this look like. And one of the things that you're going to see very clearly that from the coast to the Galilee, basically, it's a border that cuts through mountains and hills. And they are mountains, by the way, literally mountains. But you see that the valley, the fertile green valley that sticks up to the north, the Hula Valley, what we call, is actually part of the Syrian-African Rift, the Jordan River, which is below. And you can see that the Lebanese part of the border up there overlooks the valley. Now, why is that important? The middle of the border area, we're fighting on our hill and they're fighting on their hill. But in the valley area, which is the fertile area where a lot of Israelis live, they're on top of the hill and we're at the bottom. And that's the site of a lot of massive attacks. I saw a newscast from exactly where the mouse is right now, where you stand in an Israeli village and you look up and in the cliff above you, overlooking everything, overshadowing everything, are Hezbollah positions. And let's go a little bit into what's happening now. Let's go in a little bit into what might be happening, and maybe, James, we can go a little bit into the further out area. What's happening right now is that the whole southern part of the border, is actually controlled by a proxy Iranian Shiite militant organization called the Hezbollah that is trained, funded, and kind of connected to the Iranians. Iran is using the Hezbollah as their tool, as their hammer, as their actually arrow in the Middle Eastern area, and their job is to make the life of people in Israel miserable. Basically, they need to be on the edge. That is a tool that Iran is making to fight against the West. And that's the geopolitics. But literally lately, we're seeing more and more rocket attacks from the Lebanese side of the border into the Israeli side of the border. Sometimes it's long-range rockets like they've used in Gaza. But we're seeing more and more what we call direct fire from the cliffs on top of the Israeli side, directly pointed at cars, vehicles, houses on the Israeli side. Yesterday, they killed a electric company team who was actually fixing the electricity, and they shot an anti-tank missile at an electricity guy van. And killed, 2 people and injured a few more. And what I'm trying to say is, look at the border, look at what's happening now, because right now there's a growing tension. There's attacks going across. But we're on the edge of a full-out explosion that's going to happen across that border, and that's going to be a completely different game.
I think it should also be said, because it is important to note this, because a lot of people might not be aware of this, but when you look at Hezbollah, which, by the way, in Arabic, when we translate the word Hezbollah, it means the party of Allah. That's an interesting thing. The one thing that we should note, especially understanding the tactical positions that they hold to the north, specifically when I always say the north, I really mean closer to the northeast. Okay, that little finger that David was talking about, that it may be one of the worst positions for any. There's a lot of settlers that don't want to live there. Let's just say that. But here's the thing: if Hezbollah had homemade rockets like Hamas, that would be one thing. The Iron Dome is very effective, and in many ways, it's just, that's one thing. But Hezbollah does not have homemade rockets, okay? Hezbollah has very sophisticated, not nearly as sophisticated as Israel, but still very sophisticated technology handed to them immediately down from Iran, that in some cases even has guidance capability.
Yep.
And has homing capability. Okay? So when Hezbollah fires a rocket, it's very, very different because it's not a rocket. In many cases, it's a missile. And it's more dangerous. And let me just say this. If Hamas has, and I'm giving an arbitrary number just so you understand the scope, the difference. If Hamas has 10,000 rockets, Hezbollah has 1.5 million. I'm not saying that's their actual number, but I'm using those numbers to demonstrate the disparity.
The actual numbers are around 150,000.
Yeah,
rockets.
150,000 rockets compared to what they estimate to be the 8,000, maybe at the most, rockets that Hamas has during any given time. Which most of the time, prior to wartime, the estimate was what, 2,000 maybe?
Well, and they've already fired 8,000 at us during this round.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we're already talking about that, and we believe that they have more. So, yeah.
So maybe around there. So, but the reason why I'm giving that number is to demonstrate the disparity that exists between the two. In other words, if Hamas is supposed to be an aggressor, they are the 2-year-old compared to the 45-year-old warrior that is Hezbollah.
And they've been fighting in Syria for a long time. But let's kind of line this up a little bit with what I think people should look at, because here's the thing. We're going to be sitting here a week from now, 2 weeks from now, in the middle of an all-out war between Israel and the Hezbollah.
Yeah.
And when
I hope not, but that's what's going to happen.
Not. I'm praying not. And if there's anything you want to pray for, I mean, pray that we can deal with the Hamas without having to deal with the Hezbollah in the meantime.
By the way, did you hear Nasrallah's second speech?
No.
Ugh.
What did he say?
I'm growing more and more convinced that they are having second thoughts about attacking Israel.
Oh no.
I don't know if they're gonna if they're gonna listen to those instincts, but I'm beginning to feel within me, based on his speech, that there was something that happened that took them by surprise with the actions of Hamas. I don't think that they expected to see what happened. Now, I don't know what that means. Does that mean that they didn't expect the attack to take place, or does that mean that they were expecting the attack to take place but didn't realize it would be as significant or successful as it was?
I think they didn't realize the significance and the success.
That's my guess.
Hamas was completely taken by surprise. But I think something else is happening. I think they didn't realize Israel was going to react like that.
Well, that's a given.
And I think that has them shaking a little bit more than they would have, that Israel has pulled out all stops. Because I'm going to be sure that Nasrallah was sitting there and says, Hamas is going to do this. When and if they do, by the way, maybe we can, if we have time, talk about the difference between the border with Hamas and the difference between the border with Lebanon. I don't believe that what the Hamas pulled off in Gaza, that the Hezbollah could have pulled off in Lebanon.
There's no way.
And here's the thing. I think I'm one of the few people that that have literally been stationed.
So you know that
on both borders,
yeah.
And we can talk about the difference between the both borders and what happened, which connects to what happened in Gaza and what's connecting to what's happening in Hamas. But basically, what I'm trying to say is that if the Hezbollah had wanted to get into this, then they should have done it 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
If they had wanted to be a part of this, they should have gotten into this before Israel embedded itself in Gaza to take out the Hamas. Because the more forces Israel has to send to the north to deal with Hezbollah, the less that you are sending to the south to deal with Gaza. And if they wanted to help their friends in Gaza, they should have done this a long time ago. The fact that they are not has the people in Gaza cursing the Hezbollah, by the way. I don't know if you know, they're literally throwing shoes at pictures of Nasrallah on the social media down there.
Well, especially after the speech that he gave a few days ago when he basically said, tough luck. And he basically told Hamas, he said, we support you and your day will come, but right now is not that day. I forgot the exact words that he used, but it was something to the effect of, we have to allow you to face this struggle alone.
But let's get out of the helmet of the linebacker and let's get above the cable camera that floats around on the top. And I want to go into the Goodyear blimp a minute and talk about the fact that all of this is being orchestrated by the Iranians.
Oh, yeah.
And talk about the fact that Iran has accepted the sacrifice of the Hamas in order to achieve their goal. Their goal was to stop the peace process. The goal was to stop the Abrahamic Accords. The goal was, look at the Middle East. This is my neighborhood. I'm the bully. I tell you what to do. And they used the Hamas in order to achieve that from their point of view. But here's the thing. The Hamas has been sacrificed for that goal. Iran is saying, okay, Hamas will not exist at the end of this event. And as opposed to what people thought, I think everybody is realizing that Israel will take out the Hamas no matter what the world does.
But there's a series of complexities that you just brought up that have to be understood by a lot of people. One of the complexities that has to be understood is the mindset of the average Persian versus the mindset of somebody like Khomeini or Raisi. Okay, when we talk about these guys, you have to understand something. Their intent was undoubtedly to put a stop to the peace process. It was undoubtedly one of their intents. The bigger and more significant intent was to follow what the Quran tells them to do, and that is destroy Jewish lives. But there was an intent involved in this to disrupt the peace process. But here's the thing that people don't realize about Iran, that most people will never realize about Iran. They may be running closer and closer to nuclear weapons. They may have missiles that are pretty sophisticated because of some relations that they've had with Russia in recent times and so on and so forth. But what people don't realize about Iran is that they are the worst military tacticians alive. Not only are they the worst military tacticians, they are by virtue of default in their position as a state, cowards. Their whole function is accomplished through the use of proxies. They do not do anything unilaterally as a state to affect any cause, because they are not only are they not well equipped to be able to do it effectively, but they also make the general assumption that they are not going to be able to win unless they bring in the complexities that are created through the use of proxies. This is how they have been so successful south of Saudi Arabia in Yemen. The very moment, and I told this to everybody, and they told me I was crazy. They said I'm out of touch. I don't know the region. They told me to stop making such a big deal out of Joe Biden declaring the Yemeni Houthis as no longer a terrorist organization. I said it was the single greatest act to contribute to what could potentially be the destruction of the Jewish state. They know it. They understand it. They realize it. Why? If I declare the Yemenis as no longer being an enemy combatant, then anybody who buys any equipment from the United States to defend themselves can no longer use that equipment to defend themselves from the Houthis. If the Houthis are allowed to be able to walk around unchecked south of Saudi Arabia, they develop a disruption force, not a dominance force, but they develop a disruption force in the Red Sea and potentially have the ability to affect operations in the Suez Canal because of what they're launching, the missiles that they're launching. Now, the problem with that is, and I'll just take it a step further because this is like important to think about for a second. The problem with that is they become a bigger bug to have to deal with because of what they do. The existence of Hamas doing what they're doing because they're being supported by Iran to do that, okay, has everything to do with Iran understanding that they cannot unilaterally act against Israel because they're not completely or fully equipped or capable tactically to do so. They're deploying that in hopes that they're going to, as you called it, disrupt peace talks with other nations. What they don't realize, and this is the part that's really scary, what they don't realize is all they're going to do is strengthen the potential peace because they forgot one important variable. And that is, by the way, they got a lot of variables right.
Oh, yeah.
They recognize that the United States of America does not have the resolve to step in the way it should, that this current administration is friendly towards the cause of Iran. We see that with the constant talks of the JCPOA. All of that stuff is understood to be correct. What they did not take into account was the resolve of the Jewish people. Here's one thing that they were doing, by the way, and I believe this was being done. This was, by the way, not only just being done by Iran. This was being done with help from the United States. The disruption that was going on with respect to the opposition of the judicial reform and the annexation of certain areas near the Golan Heights.
Okay.
Those areas were already problematic for many Jewish citizens. They had a problem with certain things that they were seeing, right? The problem is the United States had a hand in influencing this, and so did Iran. We began to bring in a certain level of, let me just say, I'm not going to say hidden, but discreet propagandist communication that began to polarize the Jewish population. You had people, you remember this, you had people in the Jewish population that were marching through the streets of Tel Aviv saying, if I get called to fight for Israel, I'm not going to do it. Right? Yeah. There was a lot of division going on, and what they did not take into account when they started doing that, because these were outside influences that were creating all of this in Israel. Because there's the one thing that Jews are really good at doing. Let me tell you what they're really good at doing amongst their people. They're good at arguing. And if they're good at arguing, then they don't do things like protest and tear streets down and burn buildings down when they're upset about things. The Arabs do it all day.
Yeah.
Jews don't do that. You can sit down with three Jews and you can yell and scream and have World War II verbally, and they'll walk away loving each other on their way home.
My American family doesn't understand that about my Israeli family.
Of course they don't understand that. They're not.
And I know my wife is laughing right now.
Because they don't know the ways of our people. They don't know the ways of our people. They don't get it. As a matter of fact, many Arab cultures won't even respect you if you're not willing to argue that way. So what happens is this. They failed to take that into account. The Persians failed to take it into account. The Americans failed to take that into account. And basically what happened was they were banking on the fact that Jews were so divided over this issue that when war erupted as a result of these nefarious actions, it would literally destroy Israel because they would be so divided that they could not come together and fight. And by the way, that's the reason why Mohammed bin Shalom of Saudi Arabia said, we're just waiting to see what happens with what's going on here, because even MBS was not sure of whether or not Israel was going to hold their ground.
Okay, so let's go back to where we are right now, and let's talk about what's happening now, because the Hezbollah is on the other side of that red line up there.
Yep.
They're looking down at us, and they're saying, do we push this button or not? So what they're doing right now is not actually pushing the button. They haven't pulled out their rifle and started shooting at us. They're throwing darts at us. And every once in a while, darts, just to say we've done something, yep, but not to pull out all. They're
saving face. That's right.
Not only that, and here's the reason. We're asking, okay? The world is asking, wait, Hezbollah said they would. That's what they're here for. They said they would. They do that. Why isn't the Hezbollah getting in? By the way, the Hamas, the Palestinians and Hamas, the guy in the bunker underneath Gaza is asking himself, where's the Hezbollah? Where is they?
Yep.
And here's something that I think we're in the middle of, and this is a very critical week, because right now the people in Iran and Tehran are deciding, do I spend the Hezbollah in order to attack Israel? Because Israel is so upset right now that if they do pull out an attack, Lebanon will bear the brunt of it, and the Hezbollah will be destroyed. Hamas is going to be destroyed. The question Iran is asking, do I want Hezbollah to be destroyed also? Yeah. And what do I get out of that? And that is we're on this kind of seesaw minute. At one moment they say, yes, maybe we'll put the Hezbollah, and we might be sitting here a week from now where there's a massive battle going on the northern border. But we might be sitting here a week from now when Nasrallah and the Hezbollah hasn't gone in, which means Iran is trying to, keep this asset for a later time.
Yeah, so this is, and let me just say this. Iran will never act against Israel unilaterally unless it's being done through a proxy.
But what happens if it loses the Hezbollah?
Okay, so I'll tell you what happens if it loses Hezbollah, which may very well happen. If they lose Hezbollah, then I promise you, Iran will focus its efforts on its relationship with Russia, and will focus on its efforts with its relationship with China and all of the stands, Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan. And that's what they're going to do. And I'll tell you why. Okay, basically, this is where my knowledge of Bible prophecy comes into play. We know that this alliance takes place at Ezekiel 38, where the attack from the north happens via Syria. Okay, so look, I get that. Okay. But understand this. This is very, very important. People don't get this. I heard several people say, look, this is where I'll disagree with Tucker Carlson. I heard several people say, well, you dummies don't understand this, but Israel better do everything that it can to keep itself from attacking Hezbollah if something happens, and the United States better not get involved in anything at all. Okay? Let me just say this, because this is like critical. Like this is very, very important. Okay? All right. If Hezbollah attacks Israel, Israel will unleash hell on Hezbollah.
And on Lebanon.
So let me take that a step further. So Beirut right now, I promise you Beirut is begging Iran and begging Hezbollah to stay out of this.
Yes.
They cannot afford to lose the South. They can't.
No, not only the South. I mean, Israel, Israel has said we're gonna bomb them back into the Stone Age.
Yeah, but see, here's the part that people don't understand. If they lose the South, okay, and let me bring the map over here so that everybody understands this, okay, because this is really critical. If Lebanon loses the southern border, you might think, what's the big deal? There's just a bunch of mountains over there, and so on and so forth. Okay, what they don't get is if they lose the southern border, they lose the Mediterranean. Lebanon no longer has any say or control over anything that happens on the Mediterranean coast, because an overwhelming majority of any operations that take place in Lebanon right now that involve the Mediterranean for their own benefit, economic benefit, or promise involves some type of offshore drilling in one way or another.
Yep. Their economy is
totally right. Their economy is dead. And the moment that happens, I promise you Netanyahu will do exactly what I believe he probably should have done earlier. And he is going to revoke any promise that was made by Bennett with respect to the offshore assets that were unjustly and unrighteously given to Lebanon for the sake of trying to maintain peace with Hezbollah. When that is gone, Turkey is going to lose its mind, because Erdogan was relying upon that asset that was possessed by Lebanon to be able to have the rights to manage those minerals.
To be a part of it, yeah.
To be a part of it and to be able to give themselves what they needed to, so that they didn't have to deal with the existing land bridge issue that goes on. And here's the thing. Saudi Arabia wants more than anything to see that happen. Not the bad for Israel. They want to see Israel prevail, because the more Israel fights Hamas and Hezbollah, the more confident Saudi Arabia is,
the more secure they are
as a Sunni nation, to say we can do whatever we want. By the way, I'll go as far as to say this: Azerbaijan, as much of a mess as they are, especially with the killing that's going on with the Armenians and so on and so forth, they cannot afford to take a position that is aggressive in any way to Israel, because they are Israel's closest asset as a Shiite nation.
When this started off, the Iranians pressed the button on the Houthis in Yemen and say, do what you can. And the Houthis declared war on Israel and didn't do anything. Well, here's the thing. They did, okay, but it turns out, and for the first time, the Houthis fired a couple of ballistic missiles and sent a couple of unmanned aircraft that did a terrible job on one of the oil fields in Saudi Arabia, but in the case of Israel, didn't even get through. Meaning, if what happened with the Houthis, based on Iranian technologies, is what they fired, didn't manage to get through Israel's defenses, okay? Two things we learned on our side, that the Arrow system, which is an anti-ballistic missile interceptor, actually works. And the only weapon that Iran has to confront Israel directly are ballistic missiles.
Yep.
So if we have an anti-ballistic missile system up, working, tested, and effective, then that means that's been taken off. And what happened with the Houthis in the south proved to them that they have no actual function to do anything from that kind of distance. So they're going to have to use proxies. They can't fight a long-range war, which brings us back to the thing that if they lose their proxy in northern Lebanon and southern Lebanon, then they don't have any more proxies to play with.
100%.
Two, one of the things that everybody was waiting to see what would happen with is the rest of the Arabs in the Middle East.
Yep.
There's a huge population, including the Queen of Jordan, who were Palestinian inside Jordan. What happened? Everybody wanted to see if that would happen. It didn't. Everybody wanted to see if the rest of the Muslim world would come up. I mean, there are more Europeans demonstrating against what's happened than there are Arab Muslims demonstrating against what's happened. And more critically than anything, and I think nobody's really paying attention, what's happening inside Israel, both in the West Bank and inside Israel proper, that has 20% Arab Muslim population, is quiet. Altogether. I mean, there's been a little bit of attacks, and again, there's a little bit of pressure, but on the whole, the Israeli Arabs and even the Palestinians in the West Bank have kept quiet in this. What I'm trying to say is this.
So true.
The whole world, besides the whole Arab world, is actually willing to sacrifice Hamas.
100% true.
Really right now.
And they don't want to sacrifice Hamas. Can I just add to this? They hope that Hamas doesn't prevail.
Oh no.
They don't want Hamas to prevail. Because here's the reason why. Let's just take Saudi Arabia, for example. They're my favorite example of this, right?
Sisi. Sisi would be a good example.
Yeah, that's another great one. That's another great one, right? Let's just talk about Egypt for a second, because they're the more immediate south. They hold the southern border of Gaza. Okay, look, there's two reasons why they will not allow Palestinian refugees to live in the country. The first reason is Hamas's charter. Hamas's charter, even though Hamas came from the Islamic Brotherhood, which in essence is the dominant political influence right now in Egypt, right?
Yeah, but Sisi overthrew a Muslim Brotherhood government. That's what he fought against.
Yeah, but understand this. He threw an Islamic Brotherhood government, understanding that what drove what happened in Shoat al-Tahrir, besides the United States of America, also was created by an undergirding of people still sympathetic towards the cause of the Islamic Brotherhood.
Which is a very interesting conversation that we need to have sometimes. Why are the Muslims throwing their pride and their identity on such a failing ideology? But
it's Islam.
Okay, that's another.
It's one of the most influential things. But by the way, this is very important to note. What you're seeing right now with the president of Egypt, when you look at this, is very similar to the dynamic that existed when Israel went to war with Egypt in 1973. Very similar circumstance.
I can imagine Sisi on his prayer rug in the mosque with his head to the ground, praying to Allah that Hamas will be destroyed.
Yep.
I mean, the thing that scares Sisi and scares the Egyptian leadership more than anything is the Hamas comes out of this standing. If that happens, the whole Middle East is in a different place. So we're going to take out Hamas for our reasons, because we will not allow this murderous, barbaric identity to stand on our borders. But the rest of the Middle East is waiting to see that Israel actually puts its money where its mouth is and makes sure that the kind of fundamentalist, crazy Islamic jihadist, ISIS style mentality has to be taken down. And if it's not taken down, everybody is shaking in their boots.
But I think that Sadat was thinking the same way in the mid-70s. I think even as bad as it sounds, even as ugly as the war was between Egypt and Israel back in that time, I believe in my heart, understanding the history and what drove that time and understanding the sentiment of the culture as being described by my family, but by what my family told me, right?
Okay.
There was an undergirding of an extremist mindset that wanted to see the elimination of the Jewish state. Sadat was more motivated politically, and his greatest concern with the aggression that existed with Israel was more about Syria and Jordan, and not so much about the welfare of the Sinai or anything related to that, which is why he was the first to come to the table to declare peace or to create the peace, and it's eventually why he lost his life.
And who killed him?
Yeah, we know. I mean, we know
the Egyptian version of Hamas is what killed
basically
Anwar Sadat.
Islamic Brotherhood. It's the underminings, it's the undertwinings of Islam. What is the Islamic Brotherhood?
But here's the thing.
They killed him.
But here's the thing, and here's the weird thing: if you'd have told anybody 50 years ago that Iran would be supporting the Muslim Brotherhood, I mean, Iran's Shiites hate the Muslim Brotherhood, or hated the Muslim Brotherhood much more than Israel ever did.
Yeah, but I have to remind everybody of this. This is the part that everybody doesn't. This is the part that they don't understand, and this is especially dominant in the Shiite mind. I'll read the passage again. It's important. I should do it. I'll do it again and again and again and again. Wa makaru wa makara Allahu wa Allahu khayru al makarina. Think about that. They lied, right? Referring to the Jews. Yep. They were deceptive. So Allah is deceptive. Why? Because Allah is the chief of deceivers. So the Shiites especially view lying and deception as being honorable.
No, it's an asset to use.
It is. It's honorable. So when you see Raisi in front of the UN talking about the honor of living for family lives and so on, do you understand how brilliant Raisi actually is in deploying terminology that the leftists love?
Oh, yeah.
He knows how to manipulate that group. Raisi got up there and he said that what is going on right now by Israel is cultural apartheid. He used those exact words. And one of the things that he quotes, he shows his ugly face. One of the things he quotes is, it's cultural apartheid when little girls are not allowed to wear their hijab in school.
Okay, but here's the thing. He knows that Arabs all over the world could not care about what happened.
Yep.
The only reason the Hamas believes that they could pull off an attack like this and somehow live to tell the tale, because they don't have to win this war. All they have to do is survive. And the only reason they believe that they can survive, not because their Arab brothers are going to stand up for them and help them, because look at what happened. Hezbollah is not standing up. Arab Israelis are not standing up. The rest of the world, Arab world is not standing up. The only reason they thought that they could pull this off is because they knew that they had Western leftist support.
Yep.
And the only thing that's going to stop
right.
Israel right now from finishing off the Hamas is if the pressure on the Western governments from their leftist Arab supporters inside their countries, meaning the demonstrations in New York and Texas and in Los Angeles, are putting more pressure on the United States to tell Israel to stop the fighting than all of the Arabs in the whole Arab world together.
I'm going to stick my neck out. I'm going to make this statement, and I'm going to stand by it. Okay. And I can apologize to people later if I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong. I actually think I'm going to be right about this statement. The United States will never be successful in convincing Israel to stop. I can promise you that. Well, as a matter of fact, I can promise you this. I can make you this promise, and I think you'll agree with me, understanding the culture and the mindset of your people, right? Israel will not rest until Hamas is completely destroyed. And let me take it a step further. Israel will not rest until they take control of Gaza again, because they have to. And I can also take it a step further. I can take it a step further.
Now we're going into the deep areas.
We're going into some deep areas. That's right. I'm going to take it a step further. Israel especially men like Netanyahu, recognize they will never be able to complete the normalization agreement unless they do exactly that. They have to.
But here we go again. I mean, what I'm trying to point out is the fact that the people in the West are Hamas's main shield. The people in the West that are supporting Hamas, yelling free Palestine, yelling from the river to the sea, pulling down American flags in the streets of New York.
They're going to be embarrassed.
Well, they're the ones right now who are doing more to hold up Hamas and to support Hamas than anybody else. And what I'm trying to say is, if you've got the whole Arab world who is silent because they want Hamas wiped out, the Western world is not silent. And that's the question I'm saying. There is a spiritual war that is silencing, okay, one side, and is silencing the good people in the West. The people who are listening to us are in many cases not as outspoken and as noisy as the ones on the other side.
Yeah, but there's an element here that we have to discuss because it's important. We know the end game. And we know that the Bible tells us that prior to the attack in Ezekiel 38, the Middle Eastern world will have a peace established in it.
Okay.
Israel specifically. You know, unwalled cities, unfenced. Listen, now I've heard some very famous and well-known Bible teachers. They're not Bible teachers. They're commentators who claim to be prophecy teachers. Even some guys that are Jewish, that are actually saying right now we're in that place of unwalled cities and unfenced cities. That's impossible. The way they're justifying that is because everything is electronic and that's why it's unwalled and unfenced. Baloney. If the fence is electronic or the fence is physical, it's still a fence. Here's what I'm learning. I've learned this over the last 6 years more vividly than any other time in my life. The greatest success that the former president had in the Middle East was attributed to one variable, one critical variable. He understood the vitriol that the Sunni nations have towards Iran.
Yeah. And he
understood it.
And he played it.
The ignorant and foolish people that continue to march for Palestine in the United States do not recognize that the very Arabs that they're claiming to stand for are the ones that are begging Allah to see these people removed. Everybody knows that. Look, let's stop playing these games. The battle that we're fighting right now is an important one to fight, the media battle, not because we have to fight for the existence of Israel. Can I just say that? I want to be very careful how I say that. I'm not trying to be arrogant. We're not fighting this battle so that Israel prevails because we want to make sure Israel prevails. Here's the way I look at it. Israel's prevailing.
It will prevail.
Whether or not anybody wants to contribute to them prevailing, they're going to win. I promise you they're going to win because God says they're going to win. I'm fighting for the people that are going to suffer because they chose not to stand with Israel and be on the right side of history.